At the Civil Affairs Bureau, after waiting for 3 hours wearily, I sent a message, "Justin, let's break up." Just as I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I bumped into my boss Zachary head-on. "President, are you getting married today too?" "Secretary Chloe, would you like to marry me?" Thinking of the message Justin just sent, "Chloe, don't be silly. Scarlett is really sick. Be obedient. Let's talk about getting the marriage certificate in a couple of days." I smiled and looked at Zachary, answering, "Sure." Today was supposed to be the day when I and my fiancé Justin went to get our marriage certificate. After waiting for him at the Civil Affairs Bureau for 3 hours, I finally got through to his phone. But it was his first love Scarlett who answered the phone. "Where's Justin?" "Justin is cooking for me." "What can I do for you, Miss Chloe?" "Cooking?" I let out a sarcastic sneer. I had been with Justin for 2 years, yet I didn't even know that he could cook. Then Justin's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Chloe, Scarlett almost fainted today and none of her family members are around. I need to take care of her for a while." I sneered. Why did she have to faint today when I was supposed to get the marriage certificate? What perfect timing. I suddenly clenched my phone tightly. "Justin, I'll just ask you one question. Are you still coming to get the marriage certificate with me today?" "Chloe, I can't leave now. It won't matter if we get the certificate a couple of days later." Justin sounded a bit impatient. I was just about to say something when I heard Scarlett's exclamation faintly from the other end of the phone. "Oh, it's so hot." Then the phone was hung up immediately. Even without seeing it with my own eyes, I could imagine the scene where Justin was coaxing his first love with his eyes full of heartache. Since Scarlett came back, as long as she got a little teary-eyed in front of Justin, he would look as if his heart was broken with heartache. But I had never received such treatment. In Justin's eyes, I should be sensible and understanding. He had never realized that I was also a woman and sometimes needed his care. I subconsciously felt a pang in my heart, but it wasn't as painful as I had imagined. Listening to the busy tone on the phone, I took a deep breath, curved my lips with a sarcastic arc, and wearily sent a message, "Justin, let's break up." Enough. Since Justin wanted to coax his first love, I would just help them. Just as I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I saw Zachary standing at the entrance. He was my boss and the president of the Zachary Group. I was slightly stunned. As Zachary's secretary, I didn't know that this was on his schedule for today. "President, are you getting married today too?" Zachary swept me with his dark eyes and gave a faint hum. "Well, congratulations." I was about to ask why he came to get married alone. But then I remembered that as a secretary, I shouldn't pry into my boss's private affairs, so I swallowed the words that were on the tip of my tongue. Zachary smiled faintly. "Secretary Chloe, would you like to marry me?" What a coincidence. Was Zachary also stood up? Zachary's voice was deep and calm. "Anyway, both you and I are alone now. Why don't we get married on a whim?" In less than 10 minutes, I had a freshly issued marriage certificate in my hand. Looking at the photo on the marriage certificate, I suddenly wondered if I had been a bit impulsive. "What? Regretting it?" Zachary asked in a faint voice. I pursed my lips and asked instead, "President, are you being angry with Miss Jeong on a whim?" As a secretary, I knew some of my boss's private affairs to some extent. I even helped pick out gifts for Miss Jeong. Although I hadn't met this Miss Jeong, a woman who could make Zachary put so much thought into must have a special relationship with him. Zachary looked at me, his voice very calm. "She doesn't deserve it. Secretary Chloe, you'll understand later." Oh. I basically obeyed my boss's words. After all, he was the one who paid my salary. However, I felt that there seemed to be a hint of resentment in Zachary's eyes just now, which didn't match his image as a domineering president. After parting with Zachary, I went back to my small apartment. When I was with Justin, we didn't fully live together, so I bought this small apartment for myself. When I got home, I immediately deleted and blocked all of Justin's contact information. From then on, he could go his own way, and I would go mine. Wait, I suddenly remembered that Zachary had become part of my way now. He said that he would give me a 1-week adaptation period, and then I would have to move to his place to live. Thinking about having to face him almost 24 hours a day in the future, he was my boss during the day, and at night. I suddenly felt a bit at a loss. I didn't know why Zachary had proposed the idea of getting married on a whim. Was he also angered by Miss Jeong? I had only been his secretary for a month, and we weren't that familiar. And yet I actually agreed. Thinking about Zachary's face, could it be that I was attracted by his looks? While I was lost in thought, the phone suddenly rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Chloe, have you blocked me?" Justin's gritted teeth voice came from the other end of the phone. I could imagine his gloomy face at the moment. He had always been like that. During the time when we were together, as long as I showed a little bit of temper, he would think that I was being unreasonable and then immediately turn cold. I didn't know how he could be so blind and couldn't see Scarlett's tantrums every day in front of him. Before yesterday, I would still accommodate him and coax him, but now, yes, we've broken up. Why should I keep you unblocked if we've broken up? My sarcastic tone seemed to make Justin even angrier. Can you stop being so unreasonable? If you want to get the marriage certificate, we can go get it again tomorrow. I was so angry that I laughed. Justin, you're not the only man in the world. You've missed your chance. After saying that, I hung up the phone immediately and blocked him in one go. The next day, I went downstairs to go to work. Just as I walked out of the community gate, a car stopped beside me. It was a familiar car, Justin's. He got out of the car and walked up to me. As soon as he opened his mouth, he started questioning me. Chloe, are you done with your tantrum? Can you be more sensible? Blocking people like this is so childish. I rolled my eyes speechlessly. Mr. Justin, have you lost your memory? We've already broken up. Justin looked at me deeply, as if he just realized that I wasn't joking. Scarlett was really sick yesterday. I just took care of her for a while. If you're angry because of this, I'll apologize. Such a perfunctory apology. I didn't know how I had endured it for the past 2 years. I let out a low sigh, feeling sorry for my past self. I looked up at him. Justin, you and Scarlett both know what your relationship is. As your ex-girlfriend, I'll give you a kind reminder. Be careful who you trust. Step aside. She's just my good friend. As expected, since she was the person he cared about deeply, he wouldn't allow me to say a bad word about Scarlett. I shrugged indifferently, pushed Justin aside, and raised my hand to hail a taxi. At this moment, a black Bentley stopped beside me. The driver got out of the car and quickly walked up to me, saying in a respectful tone, "Madam, Mr. is busy today. He asked me to pick you up and take you to work." I was stunned for several seconds before I realized that the Mr. the driver mentioned should refer to Zachary. This might be the aftereffect of a flash marriage. I almost forgot that I had married him yesterday. Before I could say anything, Justin looked at the driver in astonishment and asked first, "What did you just call her?" The driver glanced at him and said, "This is my master's wife, so of course I call her madam." Justin was even more incredulous. "Chloe, when did you get married?" "Yesterday." I said the 2 words casually and ignored Justin, then got into the car. This news must be a blow to Justin. After all, he had always been so confident that I couldn't live without him. Even though he had left me for Scarlett time and time again during our dates, I still chose to forgive him in the end. But this time, I wouldn't. For when I got back to the company, I quickly got into work mode. I first sorted out the documents that each department needed to submit to Zachary for approval and then handed them to his assistant Finn. Finn didn't take the documents. Instead, he smiled and said, "Secretary Chloe, from now on, you should deliver the documents to him in person." Ah? But I was a bit embarrassed. When I was suddenly promoted to be the president's secretary, Finn had told me many precautions, and one of them was that I couldn't enter Zachary's office casually. Finn explained, "The president has instructed that Secretary Chloe can enter and leave his office freely from now on." His tone was a bit meaningful. I guessed that he probably knew that I had got married to Zachary. Okay. I held the documents and knocked on the door reluctantly before walking in. Actually, I hadn't figured out how to face Zachary yet. My boss had become my husband. It was a bit awkward no matter how I thought about it. Behind the huge desk, Zachary was looking at the documents carefully with his head down. I quickly put the documents down and wanted to slip out quietly. "Secretary Chloe." The man's always faint and cold voice came from behind. I took a deep breath and put on a professional smile. Then I turned around and asked, "President, I've already put the documents on the table. Do you have any other instructions?" Zachary put down the pen in his hand, leaned back against the chair back, crossed his arms over his chest, and looked at me with a half smile. I raised my hand and touched my face. I had put on light makeup this morning. Could it be that my makeup was smudged? After a while, Zachary finally said slowly, "Have you had breakfast?" I quickly responded, "President, are you going to buy breakfast? I'll go right away." I had also tried several times before when Finn asked me to order breakfast for Zachary. Zachary curved his lips and teased, "Secretary Chloe is really a good employee. Maybe. Otherwise, the president wouldn't have suddenly promoted me, a newcomer, to be your secretary, right?" I wasn't being modest about this point. Otherwise, I couldn't think of any other reason. I originally applied for the design department of the company but was informed that I was hired as the president's secretary. If it hadn't been for the doubled salary, I wouldn't have been willing to take this secretary job. Hearing this, Zachary's eyes flickered. He raised his finger and pointed to the coffee table over there. "There's breakfast over there. Have some." I was stunned for a moment and looked at him in confusion, not understanding what he meant. Zachary patiently said again, "Your stomach problem is caused by not eating regularly, especially not having breakfast. That breakfast is for you. Have some." My boss brought me breakfast? I always had a bad feeling about it. And how did he know that I had a stomach problem? Thinking like this, I asked him about it. President, how did you know that I have a stomach problem? And how did you know that I don't eat breakfast? Zachary said casually, you're my secretary. Shouldn't I know something about you? After a pause, he looked at me and said, Secretary Chloe, don't you forget that you're not only my employee now but also the person on my marriage certificate. I don't want to lose my wife just after getting married. His words sounded a bit heartless, but they made my heart tighten slightly, and suddenly there was a bit of heat in my eyes. I had been with Justin for 2 years, but he had never noticed that my stomach was not good, let alone reminded me to eat on time. I remembered once when I had a stomachache and felt really uncomfortable. I called him and asked him to buy me some medicine. He just replied to me at that time, buy it yourself on Matewan. I'm in a hurry right now. Before I could say anything, he hung up the phone mercilessly. Later, I accidentally learned from his friends that the urgent matter Justin mentioned that day was to pick up Scarlett, who had just got off the plane at the airport. I knew that in Justin's heart, I would always be behind Scarlett. Maybe back then, he was with me just because Scarlett hadn't come back yet. And I was just a substitute. Secretary Chloe? The nice, cold fragrance of the man wafted into my nostrils. I suddenly came to my senses and saw Zachary's handsome face magnified in front of me. My heart started beating wildly for no reason. President, what's the matter? Startled by Zachary like this, the suppressed emotions I had just now disappeared completely. Zachary raised his hand and tapped lightly on my forehead. What are you daydreaming about? Hurry up and have your breakfast. This little gesture made my face turn slightly red. Subconsciously, I looked towards the door, worried that it would be bad if someone came in and saw this. Although I had married Zachary, I still didn't want the people in the company to know about it. Otherwise, I didn't know how many people would gossip behind my back. Seeing my cautious look, Zachary couldn't help frowning. Don't worry. Not just anyone can casually enter my office. Oh. I quickly walked to the coffee table, picked up the breakfast. Then I'll take it back to my workstation to eat. Secretary Chloe takes breakfast out of my office. Aren't you afraid of being misunderstood? I paused for a moment. It seemed so. I silently sat down on the sofa beside it and said with an awkward smile, then I'll eat it before going out. Only then did Zachary walk back to the desk satisfied and continue reading the documents. At this moment, the office was unusually quiet, making me dare not chew too loudly when eating, for fear of breaking the tranquility here. I have to say that the breakfast prepared by Zachary was very much to my taste. He seemed to be a quite considerate person. Subconsciously, I raised my eyes to look at the man behind the desk. He was noble, clear, and handsome, with an imposing appearance. Usually in the company, I often saw some female colleagues being crazy about Zachary. Before, I just regarded him as my boss and didn't feel anything. But now, looking at this man carefully like this, he was really attractive. It was unimaginable that I had actually married him. Probably sensing my gaze, Zachary looked up. I hurriedly withdrew my gaze, finished the last bite of breakfast, stood up and said, President, I've finished eating. I'll go out to work first. When I walked to the door, the man's gentle voice came from behind, Madam, let's have dinner together tonight. I neither agreed nor refused but just rushed out, mainly because I couldn't bear to be called Madam. When I was with Justin before, I was always the one chasing after him. Now, suddenly being treated like this by someone, and that someone was my boss. Somehow, I just felt a bit uncomfortable. Soon it was time to get off work. I didn't finish my work until 7 o'clock. I glanced at the still brightly lit president's office. I didn't know when he could get off work. Wouldn't he have forgotten about the dinner he mentioned in the morning? It would be okay if he forgot. Otherwise, if I had to face Zachary's face for a long time, my little heart couldn't bear it. Just as I was thinking this, a message popped up on WeChat. Zachary, wait for me in the parking lot. I let out a low sigh and resigned myself to going to the parking lot. Secretary Chloe, are you waiting for someone? I was standing at the elevator hall entrance of the parking lot when I met Ethan, the manager of the marketing department, who walked out. I nodded. Yes. Ethan stared straight at me. Chloe, when are you free? Let's have dinner together. I frowned. When I first joined the company, Ethan would ask me out for dinner from time to time. I had refused him many times, but he was still persistent. I was quite clear about his feelings for me. I was just about to refuse when my phone rang. Seeing that it was Zachary calling, I quickly answered, Hello? Okay, I'll be right there. After hanging up the phone, I greeted Ethan and quickly walked towards exit B. Seeing the Bentley from this morning, I habitually opened the back door and was about to get in when I heard Zachary's faint voice from the driver's seat. Secretary Chloe really takes me as a driver. I'm used to it. I smiled wryly and got into the passenger seat. Zachary glanced at me. Secretary Chloe is quite popular. Why did he sound so sarcastic? After thinking for a moment, I realized that this man had just seen me talking to Ethan. Could it be? Zachary, are you jealous? Realizing this, I suddenly became bolder and called him by his full name. Zachary gave a light snort and didn't answer. He started the car and drove off, but I clearly saw that he stiffened slightly just now, the kind of embarrassment when someone had guessed his thoughts. This man. The restaurant we went to for dinner was a 5-star Western restaurant. Sure enough, following a big shot, life was good. While waiting for the dishes to be served, I went to the washroom. When I walked out of the washroom, I saw Zachary on the corridor of the restaurant talking on the phone. He just hung up at that moment. I was about to walk towards him when suddenly I saw a familiar figure bumping into Zachary. It seemed like an accidental bump, but wasn't that woman Scarlett? Sorry. Scarlett apologized to Zachary with an embarrassed look on her face, her voice so coquettish that it gave people goosebumps. Zachary took a big step back and glanced at her. Scarlett looked even more shy. Hello, sir. Can I add you on WeChat? Zachary said coldly, no. Then he walked away with big steps. Scarlett stamped her foot resentfully. I watched this scene and curved my lips with a cold smile. Scarlett had obviously intended to flirt with Zachary just now. If Justin knew about it, I wondered what he would think. After all, Scarlett was his purest first love in his heart. When I returned to the table, the dishes had already been served. I was a bit surprised that all the dishes Zachary ordered were my favorites. He really seemed to know me well. Halfway through the meal, we were interrupted by a familiar voice. Miss Chloe, why are you here? I didn't even need to look up to know it was Scarlett. Then I heard Justin's angry voice. Chloe, are you breaking up with me because you've got another man? Originally, I wanted to ignore them, but hearing their accusations against me at this moment, I couldn't help but find it funny and asked back, where I am and what I'm doing, what does it have to do with you two? Scarlett looked a bit aggrieved. But this is a 5-star Western restaurant for couples. You and another man. I wasn't going to spoil her. What? Is this restaurant run by your family? Do you think I can't afford to eat here or that I can't come here to have dinner with another man? But when Justin heard me say that about his first love, his face darkened a few shades. Chloe, it's clearly your fault. Why are you being so aggressive? Who is this man? Why are you with him? You don't deserve to know my identity. A cold voice rang out. Zachary, who had been with his back to them all the time, slowly turned around, and his cold gaze swept over them. Seeing Zachary, Scarlett was stunned at first, and the look of success at the corner of her mouth gradually turned into jealousy. Why was the man she had just taken a fancy to here? Justin was also obviously intimidated by the cold aura around Zachary. I walked to Zachary's arm, took his arm, and said with a light smile, let me introduce you. This is my husband, Zachary. What? Isn't Zachary your boss? Justin was shocked. He just thought this man looked a bit familiar. He had seen the president of the Zachary group from a distance at a wine party before. I then remembered that when I was hired as Zachary's secretary, I had mentioned it to Justin. At that time, he just said perfunctorily, people of his status should only value your ability. In his opinion, I didn't have any qualities that could make Zachary like me. But he forgot that I used to be one of the top 3 good-looking people in school. Zachary looked down at me and said faintly, I'm Chloe's boss, but now I'm also her husband. Since Mr. Justin knows my identity, you shouldn't come to disturb my wife anymore. He didn't even look at Justin. Although Justin was also a rich second generation, compared with Zachary, he was no match at all. Suppressing his anger, he could only glare at me. Scarlett clenched her hands tightly. Miss Chloe was supposed to get the marriage certificate with Justin yesterday. How come she married Mr. Zachary? She still couldn't believe that I could have such good luck. I said coldly, then I should thank you. If you hadn't pestered Justin yesterday, I might have missed Zachary. I paused for a moment and raised my eyebrows. However, Scarlett, you seem to be quite interested in my men. I took out my phone, clicked a few times, and handed it to Justin. Justin, see what kind of person the girl you thought was pure and kind in your heart is like. I didn't want to go this far originally, but Scarlett just had to provoke me. This video was of her trying to flirt with Zachary that I had taken. Scarlett also came over to look. Then her eyes widened. This? Justin, Justin wasn't stupid either. Of course, he understood what Scarlett's intention towards Zachary was at that moment, but I don't know whether he was trying to save face or still chose to believe Scarlett. He looked at me with an ugly expression on his face. Chloe, I know very well what kind of person Scarlett is. What do you think you can prove with this video? Look at yourself. As my fiancé, you turned around and married someone else. Did you already hook up with your boss and then pretended to break up with me? Listen to what Justin said. Every word was blaming me. In his opinion, I had cuckolded him. It was really ridiculous. I must have been out of my mind to like him back then. After hearing Justin's words, Scarlett breathed a sigh of relief, and a hint of smugness flashed in her eyes. She knew that Justin would always stand by her side. I mocked, Justin, it doesn't matter what you think. I've now helped you and Scarlett be together, and I'm married too. Let's just live our own lives in peace in the future. Pretend we don't know each other when we meet again." Justin was just about to say something when he was interrupted coldly by Zachary. "Mr. Justin, before getting the marriage certificate yesterday, Chloe and I were just a pure boss-employee relationship. Although we don't need to explain anything to you, I don't want to hear anyone slandering my wife." After saying that, he picked up my bag beside me, took my hand, and said, "Let's go." I let him lead me and left the restaurant. It had been a long time since anyone had protected me like this. At this moment, my tired heart seemed to find a bit of peace and also a bit of throbbing. A week passed in a blink of an eye. I gradually got used to my relationship with Zachary. Although at work, Zachary didn't give me any special treatment because of our relationship. But in life, I have to say that he was a really good husband, very careful and considerate. I suddenly felt that I was quite lucky. I was stood up at the Civil Affairs Bureau that day, but then I married Zachary. I just hadn't figured out whether Zachary was really stood up that day too and then impulsively married me on a whim. I asked him once, and he just smiled and said it wasn't the right time. Later, I didn't ask again. According to our previous agreement, I also moved into Zachary's villa. However, as soon as I moved in, Zachary had already gone on a business trip, which avoided the awkwardness of starting to live together. Even though he wasn't here, he still reminded me to eat on time every day. My stomach problem hadn't flared up again during this period. Today, after getting off work, I went back to my small apartment to pack a few things and take them to the villa. Just as I walked out of the apartment, a gust of autumn wind blew, making it a bit chilly. I walked to the intersection to hail a taxi. Suddenly, a dark figure appeared behind me and was getting closer and closer. I was about to quicken my pace when I was grabbed by a big hand. I was so scared that I shouted, "Ah, Chloe, it's me." It was Justin's voice. I looked up in shock, and it was indeed Justin. "Justin, what are you doing here? I've been waiting for you for a few days. Finally, I got you." Justin looked at me, and the strong smell of alcohol wafted with his breath. I frowned tightly and shook off his hand vigorously. "We've already broken up. What are you waiting for me for?" "Chloe, you were right. Scarlett lied to me. She just wanted to find a richer man." It seemed that Justin hadn't been without doubts about Scarlett after watching the video that day. Maybe he even went to investigate her. I raised my eyebrows. "Congratulations. You've finally seen through her. But what does it have to do with me?" Justin looked gloomy. "Sorry, Chloe. Can we not break up?" His words made me laugh helplessly. Was it only when his first love let him down that he realized my goodness? "Justin, I'm married. Even if I weren't married, there would be no chance for us. Ask yourself, in these 2 years, did you really like me or just regarded me as a substitute for Scarlett?" Suddenly, I remembered that once when Justin was drunk, he kept shouting, "Chloe." Now that I thought about it, the person he was shouting at that time should have been E. In his heart, there had always been only Scarlett. I was just too stupid before and was touched by his repeated calls of Chloe. Justin was silent for a moment and then grasped my hand again. "Chloe, I've thought about it. I like you. I just didn't realize that I had unconsciously fallen in love with you before." "So what?" I was completely unmoved by Justin's sudden confession. "Just because you say you like me, do I have to like you? Please don't come to me again in the future. I don't want my husband to misunderstand." Hearing my words, Justin's eyes turned terribly red, and the strength with which he grasped my hand increased. I tried hard to shake him off but couldn't. I was a bit scared in my heart. "Justin, let go." Suddenly, Justin was punched and staggered, almost falling to the ground. It was Zachary. Seeing him, my heart suddenly settled down. Zachary narrowed his eyes and looked at Justin. "Justin, I warned you not to come to disturb my wife again." Justin raised his hand to wipe the trace of blood from the corner of his mouth. Under the influence of alcohol, he seemed much bolder in front of Zachary. "Chloe is my fiancée. You're the one who came between us." I looked at him with a sarcastic smile and didn't show any mercy. "Justin, trying to act affectionate now, don't you think it's ridiculous? I'm now married to Zachary, and I'm just his wife. As for you, just go do whatever you should do and don't show up in front of us again." After saying that, I pulled Zachary and left, leaving Justin standing there in a daze. After getting in the car, I thought for a moment and said, "I came here to pick up some things." I don't know why Justin was here. Whether Zachary would think too much or not, I still explained it to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. Zachary gave a low hum. "I know. It's okay as long as you're fine." This simple sentence made my heart feel a bit warmed that he came to find me as soon as he got back from his business trip. This was what it felt like to be valued by someone. "Zachary." "Yes. Can I hug you?" After saying that, without waiting for his answer, I leaned over and hugged him tightly. At this moment, I just regarded him as my husband, not my boss. I clearly felt the man's body stiffen slightly, and then he raised his hand to hug me back and said in a low voice, "Chloe, I'll always be here for you." His tone was affirmative, and it seemed that there was also a hint of getting what he had wished for. No man had ever said such things to me before. I could hear my heart pounding like a drum. If I hadn't been sober enough, I would have thought that Zachary seemed to have liked me for a long time. 10 weekend. I stayed at home and planned to paint. Actually, I studied design in university, but it had been a long time since I picked up a paintbrush. I called Zachary to ask if I could use his study. "Zachary, I want to paint. Can I use your study?" Zachary seemed to hesitate for a moment on the other end of the phone and then said, "You can paint in the room next to my study." "Okay. By the way, when will you be back?" "Soon. Do you want some desserts?" "I'll bring you some." I was stunned for a moment and then smiled. "Bring me some if it's not too much trouble." I did like sweet food usually, but I didn't expect that Zachary had noticed it. After hanging up the phone, I took my painting tools and went to the room Zachary mentioned. It had been about half a month since I moved here, and I had never entered this room before. The moment I opened the door, I was shocked. It turned out to be a painting studio, with many painting tools placed inside. However, they were all unopened. Did Zachary like painting too? As a secretary, I knew Zachary's basic information by heart, but painting wasn't listed among his hobbies. However, this painting studio was really comfortable, and I soon immersed myself in painting. I didn't know how much time had passed until the door was pushed open. Zachary walked in carrying a box of desserts and a bunch of yellow roses. "Are you done painting?" I put down my paintbrush and stood up to face him. "Well, I haven't painted for a long time, so I'm a bit rusty." Zachary looked carefully at my painting and said with a faint smile, "It's not bad. Your skills haven't declined." I was attracted by the things in his hands and didn't pay attention to his words for a moment. "Are these flowers for me?" "Of course they're for my wife. Girls should all like flowers." Zachary handed me the flowers, put the desserts on the table beside him, opened them and said, "You can have some desserts. We can have dinner later." I held the bunch of flowers, and the rich fragrance filled the air at once. The corners of my lips curved unconsciously. "Thank you." This must be what it felt like to be pampered. The dessert was a very delicate strawberry-flavored cake, which was my favorite flavor. "Zachary, I find that you, as a boss, know your employees really well." Zachary looked at me and curved his lips. "I only know you." My cheeks immediately became hot, and I quickly changed the topic. "Why is there this painting studio at home? Do you know how to paint too?" The corners of Zachary's eyes slightly lifted. "I don't know how to paint." "Then this. I prepared it for you." Zachary interrupted me faintly. I pursed my lips. If I still didn't realize something unusual at this time, I would be really stupid. I looked up at him. "How did you know that I could paint?" I was quite sure that I hadn't written it on my resume. Zachary said slowly, "Madam applied for the design department at first. People who study design usually know how to paint to some extent. This painting studio is clearly arranged for oil painting." "How did you know that I liked painting oil paintings?" I stared straight at him, trying to see through his subtle expressions, but this man was so calm that there was no sign of guilt on his face. He just smiled faintly and said, "Wait a little longer. I'll tell you." After a pause, he added, "Secretary Chloe, next week is the anniversary of University A, arrange it in my schedule for me." After saying that, he walked out of the painting studio. I reacted a bit slowly and wondered if Zachary was also from University A. However, a person like him must have been a prominent figure in school. How come I had never heard of him? A few days later, it was the anniversary day of University A. Originally, I didn't plan to go back, but Zachary was invited back to University A, and as his secretary, I accompanied him. After reading the relevant materials, I learned that the Zachary Group donated a lot of funds to University A every year. No wonder University A listed Zachary as a special guest. Since graduation, I hadn't been back to school for a long time. While Zachary and the others were talking with the principal and others, I took a stroll around the campus by myself. It was a narrow escape. I unexpectedly ran into Scarlett again. However, she was indeed a student of University A, so it wasn't strange for her to appear here. I withdrew my gaze, intending to pretend that I didn't see her and take another way. But when she saw me, she immediately came up to me. Without the delicacy she showed in front of Justin, she shouted at me arrogantly, "Chloe, did you say something to Justin? That's why he hasn't paid attention to me recently." I frowned. That day when Justin wanted to get back together with me, it seemed that he wasn't just talking nonsense when drunk. He really abandoned Scarlett. I sneered and curved my lips. "You know very well what you did behind Justin's back. Justin isn't stupid." Scarlett was so angry that she gritted her teeth. "It's all your fault. If you hadn't shown that video to Justin, how could he suspect me? Chloe, you did it on purpose to take revenge." "Scarlett, Justin is just a man I don't want anymore. Why would I waste my time taking revenge on you too? Don't think too highly of yourself." Scarlett's arrogant face was distorted with anger. Thinking of something, she sneered, you just hooked up with a rich man. Do you think a man like Zachary is sincere to you? He's just playing with you. How do you know that I'm not sincere to my wife? A cold and deep voice rang out. Zachary walked over, reached out and put his arm around my waist, looking coldly at Scarlett and saying word by word, the only person I've always loved in my life is my wife. His words stunned both me and Scarlett. Scarlett's expression froze, her heart shattered into pieces, and her eyes were full of jealousy and hatred. Even if she wanted to use tricks to seduce Zachary, it was almost impossible now. And in Zachary's words, I seemed to finally understand something that I had always ignored. Zachary, did you know me a long time ago? Zachary smiled lightly and didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, I'll take you to a place. In Scarlett's unwilling eyes, Zachary and I left hand in hand with our fingers intertwined. Zachary took me to the painting studio of University A. I was very familiar with this place. During my 4 years in university, I would come here to paint whenever I had free time. I slightly raised my head to look at Zachary. How did you know about this place? Are you really a student of University A? Zachary nodded. However, I only stayed at University A for half a year and then went abroad. I suddenly realized, no wonder I had never heard of you. Otherwise, a person like you would surely be popular all over the school. Zachary laughed softly. What kind of person am I? I searched my mind for words to describe him. Handsome, noble, like a god in the sky. It turns out that I have such a good image in Madame's heart. Zachary looked down, his hot gaze falling on me, and said gently, 6 years ago, I met a girl who shone even brighter here. My mind flashed, and I opened my mouth in astonishment. Was that girl me? But I was sure that I had never met him before. Zachary didn't answer and seemed to be immersed in his own memories, saying faintly, one day, I happened to pass by the painting studio and looked inside through the window. A girl in a white dress with a high ponytail was concentrating on painting. The sunlight shining through the window fell on the girl, as if casting a halo on her. She was very beautiful. That's when I knew there was such a girl in the school. The second time I saw her was at the freshman welcome party. She played a piano piece, and it was really nice. That's when I learned that her name was Chloe. Actually, I was really a prominent figure in school at that time. After the party, many freshmen were eager to get to know me, but only she seemed not to notice me. Later, I would take a detour to pass by the painting studio from time to time and met her many times. Every time, she was so focused on her own world as if everything outside had nothing to do with her. Hearing this, my eyes were already a bit red, and my voice choked slightly. What happened later? Did you go abroad? Zachary came back to his senses and looked deeply at me. Yes, my original plan was already set to go abroad. But meeting you was unexpected for me. I didn't expect that even after I left, your figure lingered in my heart for 5 whole years. His words were like a big hand tightly gripping my heart. Tears uncontrollably welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. Actually, I knew that I was good looking. Many people had praised me since I was a child, and I had also received many love letters. But I had never thought that someone would keep caring about me for 5 years, and I didn't dare to think about it either. I looked up at Zachary. Why didn't you ever come to find me? Zachary gently wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes with his hand, and his voice sounded a bit hoarse. When I came back, you already had Justin by your side, so I had to continue hiding my feelings. However, I didn't expect that you would apply for a position in the Zachary group. Maybe this was a chance given by God. I sniffed. So you deliberately made me your secretary. I thought I was promoted because of my good abilities. Promoting you to be my secretary was my selfish intention, but you did meet the requirements too. Zachary playfully scraped the tip of my nose. If the company's personnel department hadn't approved it, your resume wouldn't have been sent to me. Well? I pursed my lips. Who were you going to marry that day at the Civil Affairs Bureau? Since he had always been thinking about me, how could he have agreed to marry another woman? Zachary laughed. Madam, don't you understand? How could I marry another woman before you? Once I realized that I had fallen in love, it was already out of control. I was stunned for a long time before I belatedly understood. My heart was beating faster and faster, and I asked in a trembling voice, were you looking for me that day? Zachary's eyes were burning hot. I thought Justin didn't deserve you. I originally planned to stop you from getting married. I didn't expect that Justin stood you up, so, everything seemed like a coincidence, but it was actually his long-planned scheme. The man who seemed cold-hearted had hidden his love for the girl from those years, and that love never faded over the years, just like aged liquor, getting stronger as it was hidden. I stood on tiptoe, hooked my arms around his neck, and kissed the man's thin lips. Zachary, thank you for not giving up on me. Before, I thought Justin liked me. At least before Scarlett came back, he took good care of me. Now, with a comparison, I realized that Justin's kindness to me was just because I was 3 points similar to Scarlett. I used to be so obsessed with Justin that I couldn't see the gaze that had been falling on me from behind. Thinking about it now, I was really hopelessly stupid. Fortunately, Zachary didn't give up. Zachary wiped away my tears, lowered his head, and kissed my eyebrows gently and tenderly. Chloe, I finally married my girl. He held my hand, his slender fingers intertwined with mine, and led me out of the painting studio calmly. The autumn sunlight shone on us, lengthening our shadows. In the evening when we got home, Zachary went to the study. After I took a shower and came out, I picked up my phone to reply to a few messages and casually clicked on Moments to have a look. Suddenly, I saw that Zachary had rarely posted a Moments update. The picture was the back view of me at University A today, and the caption was, "My wish has come true." I curiously clicked on his profile picture and was surprised to find that it wasn't that he had never posted Moments before, but that he had blocked me before. I clicked on his first Moments post. The picture was the back view of me in the painting studio, and the caption was, "She seems to like painting very much." The second Moments post was the back view of me watching others playing basketball on the basketball court, and the caption was, "Is there someone she likes on the court?" My hand holding the phone couldn't help trembling. I quickly clicked on each Moments post. There was a blank period of 5 years in the middle. Then 2 years ago, the picture was still my back view, and the caption was, "5 years have passed." I finally saw her again. However, she had another man by her side, and she seemed to like that man. I quickly scrolled through a few more posts and then saw the Moments post on the day we got the marriage certificate. I finally married my girl. Since then, all his Moments posts had been about my daily life, and I hadn't noticed it at all. My eyes started to blur, and tears couldn't help falling down. My heart felt sour and astringent, and it was hard to breathe. It turned out that in these years, he had always been standing behind me, quietly watching me from places where I couldn't see. When he saw that there were other people around me, he didn't even dare to disturb me. But he was Zachary, the president of the Zachary Group. He should be shining brightly and surrounded by everyone's admiration. For me, he was so timid. I stood up and rushed straight to the study. When I pushed the door open, Zachary looked up at me. Seeing my red eyes, he immediately stood up and walked towards me with big steps. I quickly rushed into his arms and hugged him tightly. Zachary hugged me back and asked in a hoarse voice, "Why are you crying?" There was still a sobbing tone in my voice. "Zachary, why are you so silly? You didn't tell me. What would you have done if I had really married Justin that day?" Zachary knew that I had seen his Moments posts. He gently patted my back and said softly, "As long as you're happy, everything else doesn't matter." I raised my red and swollen eyes to look at him, curved my lips, and said, "Zachary, I'll only like you from now on." The last time I saw Justin was at a banquet that I accompanied Zachary to. He called out to me, and I had to stop my steps to leave. The female companion beside him wasn't Scarlett. I heard that Scarlett seemed to have become the girlfriend of a rich second generation. He looked at me, his eyes full of complexity. "Chloe, how have you been?" I gave him a very indifferent glance. "Without you and Scarlett around me, I'm doing very well." Justin frowned and, seeing that I was now like a dazzling pearl, still asked unwillingly, "Is Zachary good to you?" I smiled lightly. "Justin, I really should thank you for not marrying me. That's why I married Zachary, and I'm very happy. So please don't come to disturb me again in the future." After leaving these words, I walked towards Zachary over there, took his arm, and said gently, "Let's go home." Zachary turned his head to look at Justin, who was still staring at me closely behind me, and said gently, "Okay."